Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy. We have been discussing important topics for Polity mains examination, and today we'll be discussing about the Delimitation Commission, because Delimitation Commission is also in news in recent times. And apart from that, we'll be discussing the National Human Rights Commission, States Human Rights Commission, important provisions, the powers, functions, and challenges that they have been facing, and also the Central Information Commission as well. So if you look at the previous year questions, National Human Rights Commission, so that is a mechanism that has been established through a legislation to protect human rights regimes in India, and Central Information Commission as well. So they are very important bodies that have been established in India. So Central Information Commission will implement Right to Information Act of 2005, and National Human Rights Commission will also protect human rights of individuals from arbitrary state action. And similarly, Delimitation Commission is also important because in recent times this issue of delimitation of constituencies is also in news very often. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important topics. So first, Delimitation Commission. So what exactly is a Delimitation Commission? In fact, in India, Delimitation Commission is a statutory body. So what does a statutory body means? That it has been established through an act of parliament. So it has a legislative backing. So that particular organization is called as a legislative body or a statutory body. Here, the Delimitation Commission is responsible for determining boundaries of various constituencies. Now understand one thing, that in India, direct elections takes place for Lok Sabha, right? So once in 5 years, direct elections takes place to Lok Sabha and also the state legislative assemblies. And based on population, so a territory would be divided into number of constituencies, right, to ensure that each constituency represent almost equal population. However, the responsibility to divide the territory into number of constituencies has been given to the Delimitation Commission. So I hope you have understood. So why Delimitation Commission divide the territory into number of constituencies? For the purpose of conducting elections, right? So for the purpose of elections, the Delimitation Commission would divide the territory into number of constituencies. And in fact, the commission is formed to ensure fair representation and equal distribution of the political power. So the ultimate aim and objective of constituting this Delimitation Commission is to ensure that each constituency is fairly represented with equal population, and also equal distribution of the political power between all the constituencies located in the country, right? So this is the primary objective of establishing the Delimitation Commission. And in fact, the Delimitation Commission has been appointed by the President of India, and it operates under the Delimitation Act of 2002. Now understand one thing, Indian Constitution has given power to the Parliament to pass a Delimitation Act, right? Article 82 of the Indian Constitution. So when Parliament passes this Delimitation Act, so accordingly President would appoint a Delimitation Commission to decide the territories. And in fact, this exercise would take place once in a 10 years. That means after every census, this delimitation exercise would regularly takes place. So I hope it is clear for all of you. For example, within India itself, we have a number of constituencies, right? So we have number of constituencies. So these many number of constituencies are based on, equal population, a fair representation, equal population. So the responsibility of dividing the territory into these many number of constituencies has been given to whom? It has been given to the Delimitation Commission. So with the objective of ensuring fair representation and also equal distribution of the political power. So political power must be equally distributed, or equal distribution of political power. So these are the objectives of delimitation commission. So I hope it is clear for you. And in fact, Indian constitution has given the power to parliament to pass a legislation, to pass an act for the purpose of constituting a delimitation commission once every 10 years. That essentially means after every census, parliament passes a law to constitute a delimitation commission, and once parliament passes a law, president would constitute a delimitation commission. So I hope it is clear for you. And there are some constitutional provisions that are given here. These constitutional provisions deal with the delimitation commission. So firstly, Article 81 of the Indian Constitution. So what does Article 81 of the Indian Constitution says? So it says that every state and every union territory would be allotted seats in the Lok Sabha in such a manner that the ratio of population to seats should be as equal as possible across the states, right? So seats would be given. For example, there's a state of West Bengal, a state of Maharashtra. So state of West Bengal and state of Maharashtra would have different constituencies, different number of constituencies. So this delimitation commission would allocate those many number of constituencies to these different states based on population, right? So ensure that each constituency have almost equal population, and only then it will result in fair representation and equal distribution of political power across different population groups in India. So this is what Article 81 of the Indian Constitution says. And similarly, Article 82 of the Constitution. So what does Article 82 of the Constitution says? So it says that the delimitation of the parliamentary constituencies should be done after every census. In India, census conducted once in a 10 years, right? So once in 10 years, census would be conducted in India, and Article 82 of the Constitution says that parliamentary constituencies after every census would be delimited or designated by the delimitation commission, and this delimitation commission will be established by the government of India under the delimitation act passed by the parliament, right? So the responsibility of delimitation of the constituencies, particularly the parliamentary constituencies, after every 10 years or after census would be given to the delimitation commission that has been established under the Delimitation Commission Act. So I hope it is clear for you. So Article 81, Article 82 and Article 170 of the Indian Constitution. So it says that states get divided into territorial constituencies, right? So because we also have state legislative assemblies and 2 state legislative assemblies, so elections would be done in a direct fashion, or direct elections takes place for electing representatives to the state legislative assemblies. We all knew about that. And there is also a need for the delimitation of the constituencies within the states for the purpose of the state legislative assembly elections, right? So that would be dealt by Article 170 of the Indian Constitution. So Article 170 states that states further divided into territorial constituencies as per the Delimitation Act every census. And similarly, the 84th Constitutional Amendment Act has been passed by the Parliament. So this 84th Constitutional Amendment Act has freezed the delimitation exercise by the year 2026. So by the year 2026, delimitation exercise should not be taken. Why? Because more population for any state means more number of seats. For example, here one thing that we should understand, Uttar Pradesh has more number of seats compared to states like Maharashtra, states like Gujarat. So why? Uttar Pradesh has more number of seats because Uttar Pradesh has more population compared to these states, and because of that reason Uttar Pradesh has more number of seats. For example, imagine that more population means more parliamentary seats, then states like Maharashtra and Gujarat will also encourage that these states should have more population so that they will get more number of seats, and that could be counterproductive. To the attempts that are being made for the purpose of family planning, reduction in population, right? So therefore, in order to ensure population stability, in order to ensure the success of family planning, the parliament has decided to freeze the constituencies, or delimitation of constituencies for the parliament till 2026. So I hope you have understood this. Now we'll understand what are the key functions of the delimitation commission, because delimitation commission perform certain key and essential functions. Firstly, boundary determination. It determines the boundaries of territories, and it also decides the number of constituencies a particular state would have. So in fact, determining boundaries by the delimitation commission, or determining the number of constituencies that each state would have, is primarily based on equal population in each constituency to ensure that there will be equal representation or fair representation, right? So ensure equal or fair representation of the population. And similarly, readjusting representation of the territorial constituencies. And in fact, delimitation commission would also look into the existing constituencies, and it would also readjust representation of the territorial constituencies as well, because it readjusts the representation of territorial constituencies in the Lok Sabha, so that is House of People. And similarly, legislative assemblies based on the latest population census statistics. And in fact, in parliament and even in state legislative assemblies, in parliament, I think certain seats are being reserved for the scheduled castes and also scheduled tribes, right? So scheduled castes and scheduled tribes seats are being reserved in the parliament. So therefore, the delimitation commission is also tasked with the allocation of seats for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes based on proportion of their population, right? So it actually decides on the allocation of seats to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes with a significant SC/ST populations as per Article 330 and Article 332 of the Indian Constitution, right? So Article 330 and 332 deals with the representation or reservation of seats for SCs and STs in the parliament. And similarly, the majority decision. So this is also another important function that has been performed by the delimitation commission, and in fact it actually adopts the majority decisions in case of a dissent among the commission members. For example, imagine that the delimitation commission would consist of around 5 members, and in case there is a dissent among the members about taking a particular decision with respect to division of constituencies. So in that case, the decisions would be taken based on majority decisions, right? So majority decisions would be the key factor when it comes to taking important decisions. And similarly, recommendations and public participation. And when a delimitation commission has been going for different regions, going to different states, delimitation commission would also takes into account the feedback from the political parties, feedback from the people as well. It in fact publishes draft recommendations in the Gazette of India, state gadgets, and also the regional media as well, to ensure that there is a widespread awareness about this exercise. And they would also get feedback from the political parties, they would also get the feedback from the people. And in fact, it also proactively conduct the public hearing as well. For example, a delimitation commission is going to any region, so it actually conduct the public hearing. So this public hearing specifically focuses on getting the views and opinions of the public, and the delimitation commission would also, if necessary, they also incorporate the views and opinions of the people about the delimitation exercise. So these are the important functions that are being performed by the delimitation commission. However, so delimitation commission is also very significant and very important. Now, so one thing that you should understand about the delimitation commission, so whenever you get the question about the delimitation commission, so you have to understand few things: that the definition of delimitation commission, important articles that deals with the delimitation commission, and what are the essential functions that are performed by the delimitation commission. And in fact, the ultimate objective of this commission, the ultimate objective is ensuring fair representation, So along with ensuring fair representation, what are the other functions that it actually performs? So apart from that, it also ensures that equal distribution of the political power. So political power would also be distributed equitably, right? So equitable distribution of the political power, and this is the ultimate objective of establishing a delimitation commission by Article 82 of the Indian Constitution, right? So this is very important for any functional democracy like India. So for any functional democracy like India, delimitation exercise is very important. Now we'll understand what is the significance of the delimitation exercise or delimitation commission. And in fact, delimitation commission, so once it is constituted, it is considered as a supreme authority. It is considered as a supreme authority because whenever the delimitation commission takes any decision, those decisions will not be challenged before any court of law. And that's why it is said that the delimitation commission is having the supreme authority, because whatever decisions, whatever instructions that are being issued by the delimitation commission, they are final and they cannot be challenged in any court of law. And that's why it is considered as a supreme authority. And in fact, the other major objective of the delimitation commission is ensuring fair representation and also equitable distribution of the political power across different regions and across different population groups as well, right? So this is another major responsibility of the delimitation commission. And in fact, so this essentially aims at ensuring that one region is not underrepresented and the other region is not overrepresented. And in fact, in India, we follow universal adult franchise. So universal adult franchise, that everyone who is above 18 years of age will be given right to vote. There will be no distinction of caste, race, religion, region. So there is no such distinction, and every person is given one single vote that he or she can actually cast their vote. So they have given right to vote, and that is based on the principle of one vote and one value. In India, every vote has a value. So one vote has a one value. So therefore it uphold the principle of one vote, one value. So irrespective of the economic status, social status, political status of individuals, so every individual will have a right to vote, and this right to vote is also having the similar value without any distinction. So therefore, this delimitation commission will also uphold the principle of one vote, one value by deciding the territorial constituencies based on the population. And in fact, so it also ensures fair regional distribution as well, because we have just understood that it studies the number of population who are located in a particular territory. So therefore, it actually ensures fair regional distribution, and this fair regional distribution to prevent one political party from outperforming others in an election. So this actually ensures a level playing field for all the political parties in India. So understand one thing, that in India we have a multi-party democracy, not a bi-party democracy, or a single party country like China. We have one single party, right? And identifying reserved seats. So it also plays a very, very important role in identifying reserved seats, because we have just understood that Article 330 and Article 332 of the Indian Constitution. So these articles reserved a certain quantum of seats for backward classes such as scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So the Delimitation Commission would also play a very, very important role in identifying the constituencies with with high population who belong to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So therefore, Delimitation Commission actually identifies the seats that are reserved for the scheduled castes and also scheduled tribes in areas where these communities have a significant population. So again, this ensures fair representation, fair political representation, and also the political power is also adequately given for the backward classes, scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes as well. And this is part of the affirmative action, right? So this is part of the affirmative action to ensure that the historical injustice, injustice that has been suffered by the backward classes would be corrected through providing reservations under Article 330 and Article 332 of the Constitution. So the Delimitation Commission has also been facing certain criticism. So it is also important for us to understand the criticism that it has been facing. So what sort of a criticism it has been facing? For example, the Delimitation Commission, states have been, it has a population control bias, right? So what does this population control bias actually means? Now, we have already discussed that, it is very important to, it is very important that states should take steps for family planning, to control population. States must take certain measures so that population explosion would be under control, because excessive population means high pressure on existing and scanty resources that we already have. So therefore, states must take a certain steps that would ensure family planning and that would also control population, right? So it is the responsibility of the states. But here the Delimitation Commission has been dividing the constituencies based on population, right? They have been dividing constituencies based on population. So this essentially means that high population means what? High population means more constituencies in Lok Sabha, and lower population means less number of constituencies in the Lok Sabha. Now, in fact, the southern states which have performed better in terms of controlling population, so if in case a delimitation exercise would be done, the southern states would get less number of seats, and that is a cause of concern. But on the other hand, the North Indian states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, so they would get more number of seats after the delimitation. So this essentially means that the representation of the southern states in the parliament would be further reduced. And this is a key concern with respect to the delimitation commission. This is one criticism that the delimitation commission has been facing. So there should be an alternative criteria to divide the constituencies, not just based on the population. But now what some southern states like Andhra Pradesh have been doing, so these states, the policy makers have been encouraging the birth of more number of children, right? So they are not taking any measures that would promote family planning, that would control the population, because they have understood that more population means more number of constituencies, and because of that particular reason, so they are encouraging more number of child births, and this will be a cause of concern, right? So this is one problem or one criticism that the delimitation commission has been facing. And apart from that, delimitation exercise would be considered as an outdated exercise. So this is an outdated method of allocation of seats, because the delimitation exercise done in 2008, so that was based on 2001 census, but the total number of seats remain unchanged. So that means, so whatever seats that we actually have in the parliament in the year 1971, so even after 2024, even after so many years, so we have the same number of seats in the parliament. So don't you think that this is an outdated seat allocation? So this has been leading to the disparity between population growth and also the representation of different regions. So we have understood that the 84th Constitutional Amendment Act, so it has freezed increasing constituencies. So there will be no increase or decrease in the constituencies till 2026. So therefore, whatever number of seats that we have in the parliament, so the very same number of seats that we have even after more than 50 years. So therefore, it is also criticized for its outdated seat allocation. And similarly, constitutional seat limits. So constitutional seat limits actually means that, so there are fewer seats available. Fewer seats in the sense that as of now 550 seats for Lok Sabha and 250 seats for Rajya Sabha. And fewer representatives can effectively represent the larger populations as well, right? So this essentially means that we have there's no match between the population and a number of seats that we have, because here each member of parliament have been representing more than million people, right? So I would say more than million people that each number of MP have been representing. So don't you think that one MP may not be able to represent more than 1 million people? So it will be very difficult, because it is very important for the MP to represent the wishes, aspirations of the people. So therefore, when there are more number of people, and it will be very difficult for the MP to represent the wishes of all these huge population, right? So therefore, there is a constitutional limit. It is also expected that this number of seats should also be increased, so that each MP would represent less number of people, and people would easily reach out to the MP, and MP can also easily represent the wishes and aspirations of the people. And similarly, unequal representation. So unequal representation in the sense that a fixed seat allocation and population growth, so that actually leads to unequal representation, and that has been impacting the voice and also influence of growing populations as well. So these are the major criticisms that the delimitation commission has been facing. So apart from that, So we have the National Human Rights Commission. So before discussing that, so what should be the way forward for the delimitation exercise, right? So it is also very important, because see, delimitation is a very important for a functional democracy like India. In a functional democracy like India, so delimitation commission plays a significant role, because it ensures fair representation, and it also ensures that equal powers are being given, equal political power is being given for each population segment. Now in this context, certain reforms have to be brought in. There should be an alternative method that should be devised, because the southern states have already done exceptional efforts to control population for the success of family planning. But on the other hand, the northern Indian states have not taken significant measures to control population, but the delimitation exercise would result in, disincentivizing the southern states for their efforts on population control, for their efforts on population management. So therefore there should be an alternative method that should be devised. And apart from that, this constitutional limit should also be changed, so that each member of parliament can actually represent a good number of people, so that each member of parliament can actually represent the wishes and aspirations of the people well. So all these things have to be done to ensure that the delimitation commission would not face criticism, and delimitation commission would also divide the constituencies in a fair and acceptable manner for everybody. So next is National Human Rights Commission. So this National Human Rights Commission is also a very important body, and there might be questions on National Human Rights Commission as well. So let's try to discuss about this as well. So like how a delimitation commission is established by the parliament. In a similar way, the National Human Rights Commission is also established, and this is also known as a statutory body. It is a statutory body because it has been established by an act of parliament, because parliament has passed the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993. So it has passed the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. So based on this particular act, the National Human Rights Commission has been established. And in fact, in India, the National Human Rights Commission is considered as watchdog of human rights in the country. And in fact, it has been established based on the Paris Principles of 1991. So Paris Principles of 1991 are the basis to establish a statutory body in India, that is National Human Rights Commission. And in fact, the responsibility of the National Human Rights Commission is to ensure protection and promotion and protection of human rights of the people. Protection and promotion of human rights of people, and this is the primary responsibility of the National Human Rights Commission, and this has been established based on the Paris Principles of 1991. Paris Principles of 1991. Now, what are the functions of the National Human Rights Commission? So it is important for us to understand the functions of National Human Rights Commission, because understand there are number of questions previously also which are asked from the National Human Rights Commission. See, why there is a need to establish a National Human Rights Commission. Now in India, majority of the population are poor. Most number of people are below poverty line, and higher levels of illiteracy. India is still underdeveloped, and India is also called as an overdeveloped state, where we have most advanced political system, and in fact the bureaucracy and also the administrative system is not that responsive, is not sensitive to the needs of the public. Because almost like every day we see in newspapers that people from the backward classes, the marginalized sections, have been facing discrimination. Not just discrimination, but exploitation by the state machinery. So violence has been used against people who are marginalized, who are deprived. So we very often see news, and there are incidents of custodial death, custodial torture by the police, and Supreme Court has also issued guidelines regarding that. So keeping this in mind, National Human Rights Commission has been established to protect human rights of people, right? So what are the human rights? For example, right to life and personal liberty. Right to life is considered as a human right, and right to education is considered as a human right, and right against child labor is considered as a human right, and right against exploitation, right against violence, right against exploitation, right against violence. So all these rights are considered as basic human rights, and it is very important to protect all these human rights. And that's why there is a body which should be independent, that has to be established to protect human rights of the people. So in case of anyone's rights are violated, they can actually approach the National Human Rights Commission for the protection of their rights. So I hope you have understood the need for establishing a National Human Rights Commission. Now we'll understand the functions of NHRC. So what are the important functions that it actually performs? And in fact, so whenever the National Human Rights Commission receives any complaint regarding violation of human rights, then it conducts an inquiry into the violation of those human rights or negligence of human rights by the public servant or the administrative machinery. Now in fact, it can actually conduct an inquiry suo motu on its own. So here suo motu means on its own, without receiving any complaint, on its own without receiving any complaint also. It actually inquire into the violence or violation of human rights, and even after receiving complaint from somebody, so then also it actually inquire into the any violence, right? And similarly, it can also intervene in any proceedings which actually involve allegations of violation of human rights which are pending before any court of law. For example, when it comes to rape, when it comes to the domestic violence, child labor, sex trafficking. So all these things would be considered, they come under the part of the human rights, and it is under the ambit of National Human Rights Commission. So imagine that suppose if there is a case on child labor, bonded labor, beggar, that is pending before any court. Now the National Human Rights Commission has been given the power to intervene in any proceedings which involves violation of human rights, and that case is pending before any court. So this is also another major power and function of the NHRC. And similarly, National Human Rights Commission from time to time actually review the constitutional and other legal safeguards. So whatever constitutional and other legal safeguards that they actually have, so those safeguards would be reviewed by the NHRC. For example, in India, we have a fundamental different, part 3 of the Indian Constitution provided for the fundamental rights. So it has provided for the fundamental rights from Article 13 to Article 32. So don't you think that it is a constitutional safeguard that has been provided to the individuals? So therefore, NHRC would also review the constitutional safeguards, and in case of any legislation that has been passed by the parliament for the protection of human rights of people, then also NHRC would review those legislations as well. And it will not just review those legislations, but it also recommend measures for their effective implementation. That is also very, very important. And in fact, it studied treaties and other international instruments. For example, if there is any important international treaty, so there is one international agreement on human rights, so that is United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Universal Declaration on Human Rights of UN. So that is considered as a global treaty for the protection of human rights at the global level. So therefore, National Human Rights Commission actually study all these treaties, international agreements on human rights, and it also make recommendations for the effective implementation for the state as well. Okay, so similarly, it also perform functions like it promotes research, right? So it also regularly conduct the research in the field of human rights, and it also spread a human rights literacy among the people, and it visit jails regularly and detention places to study the living conditions of inmates. Now, one thing that we should understand here, that if you in Indian prisons are overcrowded. Okay, so Indian prisons are overcrowded, right? So apart from overcrowded, so there are a lot of under trial prisoners, and poor living standards in Indian prisons is a violation of human rights. So in fact, we very often hear about custodial death, and also custodial death and custodial tortures. So therefore, here the human rights of the people are violated, and it is the responsibility of the National Human Rights Commission to intervene and protect the rights of the inmates and under trial prisoners who have been facing the worst living standards in the jails, because it amounts to the violation of human rights. And apart from that, if any individual is arrested, he or she should be produced before the nearest magistrate within the 24 hours. So there should not be any custodial torture, and there should not be any other violence on people who are in the police custody. So therefore, it regularly visit jails and detention places, and it also study the living conditions of the inmates. And in fact, the National Human Rights Commission, so it also review the factors which have been inhibiting the enjoyment of human rights. So there might be certain factors, so those factors would result in limiting the enjoyment of human rights. For example, terrorism. So this has been limiting the enjoyment of human rights. Left-wing extremism, and insurgency, drug abuse by the people, and organized crime network groups, and even sex trafficking of children. So all these are the factors which have been inhibiting the enjoyment of human rights of people. So therefore, NHRC would also review all these different matters. And similarly, it also encouraged the participation of other relevant stakeholders such as non-governmental organizations and civil society groups, and even media, print, electronic media. So all these different stakeholders would be involved to protect and promote the rights of the people. So these are considered as the core functions of the National Human Rights Commission. So I hope these functions are clear for you. Now, NHRC would face a certain challenges. It has also been facing certain criticism as well. So let's try to understand the challenges, the criticism that NHRC has been facing. So in fact, absence of investigation mechanism is one challenge that it has been facing. So it has no specific or separate investigation mechanism to investigate the matters, right? So it is very often dependent on central and concerned state governments for investigation of the human rights violation cases. Now, here state is mostly responsible for the violation of human rights of people. But when NHRC is to conduct an investigation, NHRC is to conduct an inquiry, it is very often depending on the central and concerned state governments for the investigation and inquiry into the violation of human rights. And don't you think that it has a flaws? It has certain limitations, because the concerned state and the central government officers would be biased towards the government whenever they are conducting any investigation, inquiry into such matters. So therefore, absence of a separate and independent investigation mechanism for the NHRC is also a major problem that it has been facing. And NHRC orders are not binding, so they are non-binding in nature. So NHRC orders are non-binding in nature. So that means NHRC is not having, or it is having no power to enforce its decisions. And government often outrightly reject the recommendations that are being submitted by the National Human Rights Commission. So in case NHRC submits any key recommendations with respect to protection of human rights, so remember that it reviews the existing constitutional safeguards and legal safeguards of human rights, and while reviewing it makes any recommendations to the government is very often refusing those recommendations or outrightly rejecting the recommendations made by the National Human Rights Commission. So this is also another major problem. And in fact, NHRC is very often criticized as a toothless tiger. It is criticized as toothless tiger. So why it is criticized as toothless tiger? Because it is having no powers. Tiger without tooth means a tiger which is not having adequate powers, and that are very important for the protection and promotion of human rights of individuals. And in fact, it is also facing the problem of lack of adequate funds. So adequate infrastructure is lacking, funding is lacking, resources are also lacking, the administrative staff is also lacking. So don't you think that when NHRC has been facing all these different problems, it impacts the quality of investigation, the quality of inquiry that has been conducted by the National Human Rights Commission? So of course there is a chance that such investigation conducted by the NHRC would compromise its independence, would leads to the compromising its independence. And lack of infrastructure is also another major problem, because despite 1450% increase in the cases that are with the National Human Rights Commission between 1995 to 2005, the strength has been reduced to 16%. It has been reduced by 16%, and this actually limits the number of cases which are handled by the National Human Rights Commission. However, the other major problem is that a huge pendency of the cases as well. So there is a huge pendency of the cases. Along with that, there are delays as well, because when you have more number of cases are filed, are registered with the NHRC about the violation of the human rights, but on the other hand you don't have the resources, you don't have financial resources, you don't have the administrative staff, you don't have the administrative buildings, and you don't have the modern technology to conduct investigation, inquiry into the matter, but on the other hand the cases are increasing. So in that case, what happens, that there is a delay in disposal of all these different cases. So here NHRC is overburdened with the cases, and that has resulted in more than 10,000 cases pending with the National Human Rights Commission. Right, so it will be very difficult for the NHRC to dispose of all these cases in a very less time. So in this case, so what we should do? So administrative staff has to be increased, and more resources have to be provided for the National Human Rights Commission, and National Human Rights Commission should be given a certain powers as well, so that to make it a tooth tiger with a tooth, a more powerful body, and that protects and promotes human rights of the people. And what are the limitations of National Human Rights Commission when it comes to handling cases? Because NHRC has been facing certain limitations. So what are the limitations it has been facing? Now here, NHRC cannot investigate the complaints which are registered after 1 year of the incident. Now understand one thing here. Now custodial torture took place on January 2025, and this custodial torture must be reported to the National Human Rights Commission within 1 year. So if a person, a victim reported this custodial violence to the NHRC after 1 year, the NHRC may not take into consideration the petition or the case that has been filed by the victim. So this is one serious limitation. Secondly, the exclusion of armed forces and paramilitary forces from its ambit. So NHRC has no jurisdiction over the armed forces and also paramilitary forces. However, there are a lot of allegations of human rights violations in the northeastern part of India through Armed Forces Special Powers Act 1956. So the Armed Forces Special Powers Act would be given certain special powers to the armed forces who are deployed in the conflict areas in northeastern part of India. So they are being given exceptional powers, and with that exceptional powers it leads to the human rights violation. But on the other hand, the National Human Rights Commission has been excluded from the ambit of it is excluded from the ambit of armed forces and also the paramilitary forces. So therefore NHRC could not take any strict action or stringent action against the armed forces or paramilitary forces. So this is also another major serious limitation. And in fact, in recent times, NHRC has been started taking cases strictly or solely based on media reports and not through its on-field work. So that is also, NHRC should actually visit the places. So on-field work of NHRC is very, very important to effectively protect and promote human rights of the people. And human rights awareness is also another very important aspect that it should focus on, and it cannot challenge the personal laws, right? So for example, Supreme Court impledes National Human Rights Commission and National Commission for Women in personal law case of Muslims, right? So these are all considered as a serious limitations that the National Human Rights Commission has been facing. However, so what should be the way forward for NHRC? So a way forward has been provided for the National Human Rights Commission. For example, so as we have already discussed that the National Human Rights Commission is a toothless tiger. Now here, so certain enforceable powers must be given to the National Human Rights Commission so that the decisions of the NHRC should be made enforceable on the part of the government, and government should not outrightly reject the recommendations that are being made by the NHRC, so that it will result in better protection and better promotion of the human rights of the people. So therefore it should be given enforceable powers. And apart from that, commission's composition, a greater representation must be given to the civil society, human rights activists. So instead of ex-bureaucrats, so instead of the NHRC consisting of ex-bureaucrats, so a greater representation should be given to the eminent individuals from the civil society, human rights activists, because this will ensure the independent functioning of the Human Rights Commission, so without any interference or influence of the government or the state. And that is also very, very important here. And here Ahmadi Commission has made certain recommendations. right? So remove 1 year ceiling to take cases by NHRC. Also, the term of armed force shall not include the paramilitary forces. So this is another very important recommendation that has been made by the Ahmadi Commission, right? So because we have already discussed that there is a 1 year ceiling on registering cases, because after 1 year you cannot file a complaint with the National Human Rights Commission. So therefore Ahmadi Commission has recommended that this 1 year ceiling must be removed. So apart from removing it, the term of armed force shall not include the paramilitary forces. So paramilitary forces should be brought into the ambit of National Human Rights Commission, and that is a very important recommendation made by the Ahmadi Commission. And independent staff, so it should have an independent staff, it should have a more budgetary allocations, and it should be given more infrastructure, and that would further strengthen the National Human Rights Commission, right? So that also result in a timely disposal of pending cases with the NHRC, because we have understood that there are more than 10,000 cases which are pending with the National Human Rights Commission. So therefore all these different provisions must be provided to the NHRC, and there should be a coordination mechanism. So when we talk about the coordination mechanism, so there is a need to establish such a mechanism between the National Human Rights Commission and also different state human rights commissions. So state human rights commissions have also been established, right, to protect human rights of the people at the state level. So and diversify the role of National Human Rights Commission. So diversification of role of Human Rights Commission, so it essentially deals with concerns like rights of LGBT community, industries, child labor, bonded labor, exploitation of a woman, and sexual harassment of women at the workplaces, and environmental impact on human rights. So all these different factors must be taken into consideration to make NHRC a tiger with tooth. So NHRC must be made a tiger with tooth, and all these different aspects should be taken into consideration, giving more powers to NHRC, and that will result in better protection and promotion of human rights of people. So anyway, that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like a lecture, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.